All right. So here we are.
Very exciting.
Excited, yeah, totally exciting to share a beautiful evening, at least the beginning of it, with you, Sophia.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for joining us.
It's so nice to be here. A pleasure.
Thank you. And I can't think of anyone else who better embodies this living incarnation of feminine knowledge and spiritual wisdom to unravel what we're going to speak about today, which is each topic is monumental by itself. And when coming together, it's truly a volcanic explosion, because we are here tonight to speak about sexuality and birth, with as much as no one wants to look at it, they're intertwined. And,
absolutely.
Yeah, and huge taboos. So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, we're here to weave it back together. And I think, you know, it's such an obvious thing that sex creates the mother and the father. But once that identity comes towards us, sexuality is like at the other end of the spectrum to the mother. So it's kind of crazy that it's like this, but it's because there's so much power when a woman owns her sexuality, and that's why it's been separated for so long.
And what else? I mean, the mother, the father, and the baby, whether artificially, we're talking about the union of two major forces, qualities, essences, and like you said, indeed, it's out of the window.
Yeah.
And so much clinical and sterile, and you know, what's with that? And this is what we are going to explore. So before we're going to delve deeper, I'd like to introduce you a bit for those who don't know you. And actually, I would love to know more. And this is how we'll start. You are a soulful doula, right? Certified through the KMRT, which is Kundalini magnetic resonance therapy, an amazing modality birthed by and via Darshana Parmar, which is she's an entity by herself, and we for sure invite her to this.
She's with us.
Yeah, one way or another. And you're also a sensual guide, and an amazing artist, really art and beauty and intelligence, as I see you. And I'm really curious to know,
thank you,
a bit more about yourself and what brought you to do the work that you do today, because it's all about our personal journey.
So much to say on that. I mean, my journey into the erotic really started in my mid-30s. I mean, I've been a photographer for 20 years, so I've observed the world for a long time. And my own personal exploration into my sexual subconscious at a time when I didn't have all the things that a woman of my age should have. I didn't have the husband, the partner, the child, that trajectory. Something else was calling me. So instead, I was sad about not having those things. And then I was like, I don't have a child and I don't have a partner. So what do I have is freedom and time, and an incredible amount of curiosity and personal desire. And so I dove into my sexual subconscious to really meet the things my body was calling for, which was to explore submission in the space of a sacred partnership. And so in that space, a huge amount was unearthed in my psyche, in my nervous system, in my ancestral memory. And through those experiences, it really began my interest at unraveling my lineage and finding the personal healing that I needed in the space of sexuality to open my voice, because I knew that it was part of my path to work in this space. So creativity and my artwork was a step towards me being able to express, embody, and communicate through the visual, through the vocal, through the body. So my art practice, my own personal exploration of eroticism and beauty, and love essentially is what brought me into this space. And then I met Darshana, and she took me to the next level, which was this really exploring the work of the soul through the role of the soulful doula. So I've kind of been working between worlds with ancestry. Also, this work that I'm carrying on, my father began at the end of his life, and that expression of him transferring from physical to non-physical was a very important part of my personal education and experience with understanding the movement of souls between the realm of the unseen and the seen. So it's a real honor to be at this point in my life, to begin after the personal healing to do in this space that I draw on, which I now bring as my offering.
And in a beautiful, perfect alignment, actually, with what I feel. Of course, everything is subjective, but in my view, there is a collective huge shift when we're talking about birth, and you bring this metaphysical realm, which for us, it's kind of obvious, but to the majority and where humanity is, of course, there's a long way to go, but still the wheels are already rolling, because this knowledge, this wisdom is coming out to the surface.
Ready. Everybody's ready.
Exactly. That's why I say it's in alignment with your personal journey that brought you to this point.
Well, I made a contract with the earth to be here at this time. So one of the elements of being a soulful doula is understanding the relationship between all souls that child will be connected to, and that really is in relationship also with the solar system and the earth herself. So I'm contracted with Gaia. I'm here at this time to complete work that in other lifetimes I was not able to, and I'm beginning to find others like you who are also on this mission, and we're beginning. So it's a very exciting time.
Yes. That's what we said on our previous talk, that it's a great time to be born.
It is. It's wild, but we are all born for it. That's why we're here. We chose it. Yeah.
And still for a very long time, and still going on. This is not, the ordinary reality for many of us, because we are under 5,000 years of suppression of our sexuality, of our femininity, and these are, this what leads into what I think we both share, the full expression, the full potential of what birth holds within it. So let's talk about where sexuality and birth intersect. Where do they, how,
Well, that's a really good question. So, I mean, obviously there is the beginning of the being, the conversation between the expression of the masculine and the feminine through the biological, and that is the start. So the act, the desire, the expression is the beginning. And what I always say is that we are the desire of our ancestors. So our ancestors were moved into this sexual union, and through that we come into form. So that's the beginning, that's the imprint. But where we maybe meet it later in life is the expression of our primal nature when we come to birth. And there are so many invisible constraints around our bodies that we maybe don't even recognize until we begin to want to bring awareness to them. And these can come from society, these can come from our parents, these can come from our ancestors. And so there are many, many blocks to us being within our sexual bodies without fear, guilt, or shame. So I think with sex and birth, there is this beautiful expression of the beginning of us. And then as we transfer from maiden to mother and we come into our matrescence, then we meet our sexual nature in its most potent form. But this can be very frightening, because many of us have not made peace with this part of our nature. So when we come to meet it in quite a high stakes environment, it can cause separation between our mental identification of who we are and where the body is wanting to take us. So it creates this separation.
There's plenty of years already through our childhood leading to our motherhood that so many things are coming into the field already.
Mm-hmm. And so many of us have don't feel that we inhabit our bodies. So many things have happened to us, and we haven't been brought up in a society or a culture that has taught us how to be at home in ourselves. And so many of us will have had our sexual boundaries crossed, and this can leave us with disempowerment, physical, emotional, psychic, which closes us down. And we know that when we're in that space of birth, advocating for both our bodies and the body of the child coming in is so important. So us feeling and understanding and knowing our boundaries, being clear to communicate them, and just to express ourselves as we need to. It seems like such a simple thing, and it is such a simple thing. It's not complicated, but it's the unlearning that we take to get back to that place, because we are conditioned out of this primal state so early.
Yes.
Mm.
Yeah. How do you start unraveling that? How do you come back into your primal body, into pure raw expression of voice, of chakra, of throat, of heart, yoni? Because during birth, this passage will want and will open, whether we want it, whether we're willing to, or whether we are not.
Yeah.
So when we want to, to create this allowness before.
We do it really, really gently. So the practice of KMRT, which really underwrites my coaching and how I guide, is when we're talking about sexual energy and kundalini, which is our life force, our pranic life force. Traditionally, this is maybe engaged with in quite a yang way. So I don't know if any of the women who are part of this space maybe practice kundalini yoga and have had experiences with their kundalini that are very heightened, very, it brings the energy kind of up and out. But with KMRT, we simply move gently in and we observe that energy in its natural state so that we can begin to build a relationship with that energy in a very, very soft way. And it's incredible how quickly it can move things from the subconscious into the conscious. And when we go in, this can sometimes be as terrifying as expressing out, because some of us, we'll all have different trauma imprints that, which meant we have created behaviors in order to survive, where we either will have shrunk or we will have expanded. So us beginning to kind of chart this course of us meeting our sexual energy in its very, very natural state is the safe space within which we can then journey to meet those extremes and to be able to travel from the spectrum of the dormant and the passive into the outward and the expressive. So we go slow.
Slow and
gently,
gentle.
easy does it. No hurry. Yeah.
Yeah. It seems that we lost our sensitivity,
Yeah, and that's where the magic is. Yeah, the subtlety. There's such power in the subtlety. And when we're always, I think with sexual expression, sexual experiences, we can always rush towards those wild, raw, powerful experiences. That's maybe where we go when we think of the primal. But actually, those experiences are part of a primal scale. But there's so many different places to be on that scale, and getting to know all of them is the real beauty, and that's where our power can be. So we're adaptable in that primal nature.
And richness.
Yes.
So not just one
knowing the self.
Masculine again. And just to balance things out, I love the masculine, because many times we mentioned the patriarchy and the masculine qualities. Yeah. They are huge and they are beautiful. They're just over dominant, and we in a place of creating space. Yeah.
Harmony. So they can work together for us, because I think within birth as well, the focus is on the body, but also the mind plays a very important part in this. But the mind has to trust the body, because we're so used to the mind leading and the body following. But actually within birthing, we get to move first with the body. And if the body feels safe and we know the body, then the mind can follow. And I feel like it's the practice of that in the lead up to that very expanded state that can really deliver the tools and that knowing in how to move not only into ourselves, but into the multidimensional nature that we really are. So if we go straight into that experience without having any understanding of that awareness, that is when we want to block it and we want to push it away. But if we have an experience and we're given a pathway in beforehand, then we can have experiences, and our receptivity gently expands so that we can hold the expansion that will happen during birth.
And it's beautiful that the beginning starts here. I mean,
yes,
the path is here. It's accessible.
Exactly. Yeah. We have everything we need. Yeah. And also it begins the conversation, the precognitive conversation between the mother and the soul and the body of the child. So in that precognition, we get to, in that subtlety, we get to slow, we get to quiet, we get to listen. And one of the practices, or the main practice of KMRT, is kinesthetic listening. So it's listening to the sound of the body, how it wants to move, how our consciousness processes emotion, how the body responds. So in that quietude, we can begin to communicate and to listen to what the baby needs, to what we need. We can begin that conversation. And there's so much benefit to having that prenatal relationship. It supports less birth intervention. It supports the integration of the sense of self of the child once it's arrived. Children with precognitive relationships adapt better to their sleep cycles. There's less postnatal depression from the mother, because her identity in relationship to the child has already begun. So there are so many benefits to this awareness of creating healthy relationship, boundaried, caring. You're beginning your motherhood in that space of precognition, and you begin to then prepare with how you want to meet the soul of your child embodied externally, but you get to be with that soul as it grows from its primal body in the womb and moves through yours in that expression of the deep primal.
You talk about it, and on my mind jumped the thoughts that sometimes it's not something that I hear on my close circle, but you do hear about fathers mostly, because simply due to the physical distance, that they say, around when the child is 1 or 2, when they start developing their communication skills, and then I feel the relation child, where indeed already so far back this connection, this relationship are forming
and
organically spill into the physical life.
And it starts in the desire of both, the desire of the other. That's where that relationship with the soul of the child is beginning. It's in the heart, and that desire to expand through lineage, to expand through bloodline, to expand through ancestry. That's the start of that relationship. So it starts so much sooner. You know, when those first words, it's already a lifetime.
Exactly, already a lifetime.
Wow. And it's, you know, it's not just the relationship between mother and child and father, it's the relationship, and I call it a soul system. You know, it's like the mother is at the center of this expansion of her soul system. And so the arrival of that child will change a brother into an uncle. It will create cousins. It will create a grandmother. And so it moves a lineage, a woman's desire and a man's desire, or however they identify when two beings come together with an X and a Y chromosome. They are creating this evolution in their soul system. And that is so beautiful. I just, it creates, you know, it really roots a woman into the center of that spiral of Kundalini. And the Kundalini energy is the gateway really across time and space, that our ancestral conversation is moving through the bodies, and it's powered by this sexual energy. It's poetry. It's poetry.
You know, as a shift of a tectonical planetary
and then it is, you know, it is. And then, you know, you have the living ancestors, you have the ancestors who are in non-physical, who also will be part of this story. And then you have the planetary alignments, which will also correlate and create this sacred geometry when the child lands on the earth, which that child will be moved by as the rotations of the sun's cycle begin to move that child through its story here on earth. So it's, phenomenal. Phenomenal.
I want to take us from these higher, subtle planetary planes back to the body, and back to the energetical Kundalini, and back to the, you know, many people mix between sexual energy and life force. And this is where this taboo of sexuality comes into the field of birth. I want to expand here a bit more, to take a look at it and see what more perspectives can be offered here.
Well, I mean, birth traditionally is a sterile environment. There is fear, there is danger present in the room, and the environments within which many, many children land on this planet are filled with that fear. And so at the opposite end of that spectrum is pleasure. And pleasure is something that will support the body of the mother and ultimately the heart of the mother. Because when the heart expands, she can allow that influx of love to move her towards and through her birthing portal. So pleasure and intimacy, you know, it's the energy that got baby into the body will also move the baby out of the body. But that disconnect and again, going back to those invisible boundaries of shame and of fear, of a woman connecting to her body in pleasure in a public environment and also in relation to a child. It's that innocence, you know, and somewhere throughout history, due to the power that a woman holds when she is in acknowledgement of her full sexual spectrum, that is a woman who's incredibly powerful. And that has been a fear, because women hold this power to birth and to bring children to earth. And so when a woman is able to reclaim her body as her own and her pleasure as her own, and I think as a sensual guide, so much of the work I do is returning women to knowing that their pleasure is in their hands. So it's not outside of them. It's not up to anybody else to give them an orgasm. It's up to them to know their body, to know their pleasure, to know what feels good, and to be able to give that to themselves and to invite another into that pleasure with her. And so when we're in the space of, so we'll go back to child creation, we're going into that space of lovemaking, and a woman can be aware and responsive to her arousal and to how she wants to express herself, and engage from that place with her partner, then she steers the ship. So she's not focusing on the pleasure of the other, which is how we've been trained. And I think so much that outward looking kind of people pleaser, I'm a recovering people pleaser, so I know that space very well. And it's deeply painful when the other becomes much more important. And in the space of birth, woman is a sacred channel, and she needs to see herself as that, so that the others around her can support her in that too. Her partner, her doula, her doctor, her nurse. If she can embody that, then the others around her will be more likely to follow that. But a woman understanding that her being in pleasure is not shameful will help her regulate. It will help her rest. It will help nourish her energy system, her psyche, and her physical body. And I think those blockages to that experience, that's the challenge, that's the opportunity, that's what our work is doing, is bringing women into the awareness that that is available to them. And it's all in the doing of this practice before coming into that space of birth, so that there is a recognition, there's a somatic memory, there is an opportunity to work through the emotional density around these behaviors, these ways of being. And I think in the kind of PDF that I prepared, I don't even know if we're going to get to it because it's just so nice to talk to you. But one of the ways
now.
Oh well, no, I mean, yeah, it's just nice to chat. I'll bring in the bits from it that I remember. Yeah, but kind of under this title of primal is going to mean so many different things to so many different people due to their experiences. And so really this primal body, kind of how I look at it and how I see it, is uncivilized behavior. So all the behaviors that we are told are wrong, are bad, expressions of being in our body that we're told not to. And if you kind of simplify this and bring it down just to how a woman interacts with her pelvis and her hips, even moving your pelvis in public can cause alarm because of the power in that space. And so when we think about kind of tiny cues like that we hold unconsciously, that when we come to practice sensual embodiment in our own space, in a safe space, we get to see what is held in these places in the body so that we can begin to move them. And so there'll be, on this physical level, there'll be things that we hold due to our experience of life and also that of our lineage. There'll also be emotional density that we get to express, and that's vocalizing, that's using the voice as vibration rather than language, using our breath as if an animal, also, what else? Oh, I've lost my train of thought. Yeah, there's just these kind of levels and layers of how we can move through the blockages that surround our body that we don't even realize are there until we bring awareness to them. And that awareness is what changes us. It's our perception. And like we were exploring on our podcast, on the conversation we had, you were saying birth is all about perception. And that space of perception and the subconscious and the conscious mind, when a woman can regulate so that she can observe and be with the state that she's in, that she can choose to create from neutrality versus going into fear, going into the subconscious panic, getting detached from her body, having that separation of mind and body. And in that space of neutrality, both can work together. So it's that unification through pleasure, through sensuality. But we have to do the work to clear the shame, the fear, the guilt, the anger, whatever it is, the grief, whatever lies within us, you know, and bless all those blocks, bless all those wounds, because it's what we get to work with personally. It's our specific puzzle to undo. So I don't see these things as bad. They just are. They're just part of us. And that's when we can begin to welcome them in as teachers, and we can make peace with them. And then we are not trapped by them. We find freedom in that allowance. And that's that, you know, beautiful overarching word, which really is the root of birth and conception. It's allowance, letting it happen.
Aho, woman. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. And it's, you know, it's not easy all the time. And I want to acknowledge that, you know, when we talk about pleasure and the primal, and, you know, it can get all up here, and actually doing this work, we meet the depths of our pain, and we meet the places in our hearts that are so deeply wounded, because family, it's this soul song, and it carries the deepest wounds that a human being can experience. So any woman who is choosing to walk this path and to do it with awareness, I have so much respect for them, because this undoing takes patience and time and devotion. Compassion, yeah. It's devotion and love of the self. It's like we can only meet another in the depths that we're able to meet ourselves. And I have deep respect, and I want to acknowledge the pain as well as the pleasure, because both are in communication constantly.
Yes. And I'm thinking how also when I reflect on my own story, so still not obvious that this is the path and this is the work. I don't like the word work so much, but indeed, this is the path to go through when we want to arrive to the altar of our birth.
Yeah.
Embracing the experience. And this is a really deep wish of mine, and an action ours, to call people, to draw them to that, because it's so not obvious, you know, who thinks about it. Yet these are the themes that ask for attention and compassion and devotion.
Yes.
And full respect and courage to go through, so we can
we meet them all. Yeah. And I think Yeah, I think, you know, it's this desire to connect to the places that have been the disconnection. I mean, I was just, kind of while I was researching, I was kind of piecing things together. And I know when I was talking about what we were going to talk about, I shared a few seeds with you, and you were like, oh yes, talk about the, you know, sex and the subconscious. And it was such an interesting thing, because my lead into this work was through me exploring dominance and submission, and there was such a deep call to meet my submissive woman, to understand what this was and why that desire was there. And while I was studying, beginning my studies as a soulful doula, I was also studying with an incredible international dominatrix who's written a fabulous book. She's called Anonomis, and she's written an incredible book on the history of the dominatrix, so tracing it right back to the ISIS, the reign of ISIS. So she's a phenomenal researcher and practitioner. And when I was studying with her, it was really fascinating, because it's like I was studying the kind of awareness of the mother, and the conscious mother, the conscious womb. Darshana Palmer was my other teacher. So it was like the conscious womb. And then it's like I was observing the impact of the shadow of the mother, and how that expresses in the sexual subconscious of adult males particularly. And what was interesting was understanding that where our kinks and our fetishes are created are in childhood. And this is usually from behavior and an experience from the primary caregiver that creates this kind of shock and awe that then manifests into like a somatic memory and an excitement and a desire that then gets shelved and placed into the subconscious as is kind of wrong and bad. And there's a coping mechanism that's attached to that. So a behavioral pattern that's attached to that experience. And that manifests later on in life. And it's that wounding, it's that moment of disconnection. It's such a beautiful mechanism of the human mind through the human body. And it finds a home, it finds a place to be loved, to be cherished in this space of subconscious expression through the sexual body. So our kinks are this incredible somatic expression and a release of a suppressed energy. And so it was really interesting to kind of see this movement, and then to understand that when we are potentially wanting to conceive, there can be blockages in our energetic field, in our emotional field, and in our physical body that can be cultivated from suppression, disassociation of our sexuality and our sexual expression. And so when we begin to explore our sexual subconscious, we begin to free up this energy, this sexual energy that's deeply creative. It's like a compass of the full spectrum of who we are. And so it's a very fascinating and very strange things to be studying in parallel. That was a bit of a head fuck, if I'm honest. But I was like, hang on a minute, there's something really interesting here, because it was like getting taught both ends of the spectrum at the same time. And so it kind of made me realize this incredible link and how much energy in our psyches and our bodies can be held down, suppressed, which causes depression, which causes habitual emotional patterns, which cause these this kind of density. And so when we're coming into connection with one of the biggest, most intense sexual experiences a human being can have, if we haven't done that work, it's just energy. And it's just the word sexual that freaks people out, you know, but it's just this energy. If we're not comfortable with that energy in our body, then again, it's like we won't want to go anywhere near it, and we won't want to let it in, and that's very normal. And so it's just, this kind of like permission to go, okay, this is, these forces, these invisible forces are on the primal body, which ultimately the primal body is the fetal body, because this is our primary state. And so when we return to our primal body in birth, it's like we're mirroring this first body. And so we can be in communication, we can match it. And what needs to travel between those two bodies can. That information between those two can, because when we uncivilize ourselves and move back into the primal state of this original little blueprint of a body, then they can move in harmony and synchronize and find resonance together.
I have no words. I mean, I'm just nodding here. How can you put words to that? And especially when we look at birth, and birth is a primal experience. It's nature, it's core. It asks us to go into the most raw, the most pure, uncivilized expression of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So it totally resonates.
Mm-hmm. And I think, one thing that I, again, like just matching these weird experiences that I call up in my life and I long for, it's like my character of extremes. I'm understanding why it's useful, but I remember there was like, in that space of submission, there was such joy at being able to inhabit my primal body. And that was part of the reason why I was calling for it. Is like I was ordered to crawl and, be an animal. And as a civilized woman who's been trained to hold it all together, to have her shit tight all the time, I got to release all of that expectation, and I got to be held so deeply in this unspeakable way. I got to behave in an unspeakable way, and it was celebrated, and it was so powerful. And it was such as a woman who hasn't birthed, it was this relief and release. And it was this allowance of attention to be focused on me in the space of pleasure and also pain. And so it was just being able to inhabit my body in ways that society told me I was, was wrong and bad. So I learned a huge amount in that experience. And I was very lucky that it was held within the heart of another who we were in love. And so it was done in love, and it was, it was safe. But even so, the impact of some of those experiences, I really had to unwind them. And I received a lot of information from the somatic kind of shocks. So I kind of liken it to the postnatal integration that is also really important for women who have suffered with birth trauma, because when we've had traumatic experiences in the body, they repeat, and they either repeat in the body, in behavior, in repetitive habits, which again, this energy needs time to be witnessed, to be heard, to be released, and to be grounded. So it's like this prenatal relationship, and also, postnatal support for women. More and more I'm understanding that's what I'm wanting to really focus on, because we focus on the beginning, we focus on the birth, and so often, a woman is left with a completely different identity, sense of self. She meets her lineage head on. She meets all of the imprints of her primary carer, of her lineage, essentially. And so the having time to digest, to be held, to debrief that transition, I think is also really, really, really important. So kind of having this holding before preparation, you have the experience in the middle, and this integration time to actually come, you know, the baby's soul is landing in its body. That takes time. And for the mother's identity to land in her body also takes time. So this,
even a lifetime.
well, yeah, exactly. Exactly. You know, I might work with someone for 3 months, but yeah, a lifetime. But it's, yeah, I think it's like with any big experience, integration is necessary. And so often with birth, it's not recognized. And, you know, the new family goes off and everybody's in shock and doesn't know what's the fuck has happened. And
even though when this process of priming, of awareness is in place prior, in the majority of cases, if not all, also the spilling into parenthood is much more harmonious and connected and balanced, because, you know, I totally get that it's a massive human experience, and of course it shifts planetary, tectonical, you know, in everyone, mother, baby, family, and beyond. Yet I truly believe that these are processes we are designed to go through.
yeah.
But with this awareness, if we had this awareness, and we will have, because we are both on this planetary evolution, I believe one day this will be a common knowledge.
Yeah, me too.
Hopefully in our lifetime.
When we're old women, it will be really normal.
What again?
When we're old women, when we're grandmothers, it'll be just like, oh, multi-dimensional birth. Yeah, so like 2022.
Exactly. Yeah, so that's what I was saying, that once this is in place prior, it also has a beautiful impact before. And I want to say also, Sophia, I was while you were talking, I got so activated and emotional when you were talking about your experience within the submissiveness, dominatrix space, how to be in your own really pure, full, raw expression, and to be witnessed and to be held with so much love and so much acceptance. Myself, I'm moved to tears, because generally wise, and also in the field, in the time of birth, we are so exposed, we are so vulnerable, literally all of our layers are being peeled. So we get to the core, we get to the primalness, and indeed make sure that you are surrounded by the people who are able and willing to see you and worship you on this magnificent human experience. But it's like, it's fucking orgasmic.
Yeah. But that, I mean, that vulnerability, like so much power in it. Yes. But for us to get to that place takes so much, because it's terrifying. It's terrifying.
Yeah, but like we started our conversation.
Yeah.
It's simple. It is accessible.
Yeah.
Every one of us can go there.
Yeah.
Yeah. There and meet ourselves and own and celebrate ourselves.
Mm-hmm. And that's one other thing. That's another really good point that I think is so important, is the understanding of a woman understanding her primal nature and being comfortable there, but also her partner not getting totally freaked out by a woman in her primal nature, because he might have different experiences that means that's very destabilizing and very hard for him to meet her there. And so bringing a woman into her primal nature on the journey towards birth, and her doing it on her own, but also with her partner, so that they can both explore that and know it. And I'm talking about the expression of intense emotion. I'm talking about her becoming an animal in his eyes, all of those things, which some men might bow down to it and recognize it and be in absolute awe. Other men might be terrified. Other men might want to freeze. And again, it's all those kind of trauma responses, like the fight, flight, fawn, and freeze. And so caring also for the man, in the father in this journey of him knowing what a force of nature his woman is, you know, and he won't know until that moment, but you can have experiences within which you embody more of yourself so that you're both comfortable with that full spectrum of who you are. And I think that's deeply healing, deeply powerful, and very sensible birth prep.
I'm totally with you, and I think we just received the next topic of our conversation.
Amazing. How can I
could go on with you for hours, and probably we will.
Yeah.
But as we bring this conversation and this space, we're about to close it up, bring it into completion. Let us know, how can people find you? How people can know more about your work?
So my home online is themodernerotic.com. And there I do my coaching. I'm doing one-on-one at the moment, and I'm preparing self-study courses for next year. I also work with my lens. So I bring my photography into this space so people can work with me in the space of the sensual lens, which is a photographic journey of them, women, beings in their natural grace. But you can also find me on Instagram at _modernerotic. And through that, you can find my podcast where I talk to amazing people like you, sacred birth keepers and pleasure pioneers, and radical thinkers. So those are the places where I'm working at the moment.
Radical. I love
yes. Gentle radicals.
I love you so much.
Love you too.
So much for sharing with us this wisdom and opening ourselves to completely other dimensions.
Well, it's the gateway to the multi-dimensional mother. It's what we're holding. This is why we're here. So it's really a pleasure to have a space to talk with you, and thank you so much for inviting me into your beautiful group. I send love to all the women across time who are going to tune into this, and I just want to thank you so much for giving me the space to share what's deeply in my heart at the moment. So thank you so much, Inbal. A real pleasure.
Yes. All right, we call it off here. Otherwise, we'll stay here all night. So thank you, Sophia.
It's a joy. My pleasure. Good night.